So far we have been learning about King David, right? And so we've learned about his mighty men and his army and how he's this warrior with these special forces. We've learned about his promise. But today we're going to learn a story about King David where he made some really, really bad choices. And those choices changed his life forever, and it changed the lives of many who came after him. So in the springtime, in the time of year when kings go out to war, King David sent his lead commander Joab and his special forces and the entire army of Israel out to battle. They fought the Ammonites. But King David, in the year that kings go out to war, he stayed home. So one day he went out to his rooftop where he could see out to all the houses below, and he was kind of pacing back and forth and pacing back and forth, and off in the distance he saw a woman. And she wasn't just any woman, she was a beautiful woman. And he liked what he saw. And so he inquired of his messenger to go find out who she was, and word came back that this is Bathsheba. Bathsheba is the wife of Uriah. You'll remember from the previous story, this is one of David's mighty men. She is the daughter of Eliam, another one of his mighty men, and she is the granddaughter of one of King David's chief advisors. But still, David said, "Summon for her, she must come." So she comes to his palace, and he sleeps with her. He sends her away. Sometime later, a messenger comes back from Bathsheba, comes to David. The note says, "I am pregnant." So David, he sends out another messenger, this time for Commander Joab to get Uriah, the wife of Bathsheba, back. And he comes to the palace, and David begins to make small talk. And how's the war? How's Joab? How's the mighty men? How's everything going on? Forces. And he tells Uriah, Uriah, it's been rough out there. It's been hard out there. Why don't you go back to your home, sleep with your wife, relax, have a good time. It's been rough. And so Uriah, he does not do that. In fact, he goes and he sleeps at the entrance of the palace of King David, where all of David's servants slept. And David gets word of this, and he approaches him the next morning, and he says, "Why didn't you go to your home? You've been away such a long time. Just go to your home." And Uriah is somewhat taken aback, and he says, "Oh, King David, my commander Joab and the Ark of God and all of the special forces, the mighty men, they're out there on the battlefield camping in tents. How could I possibly go home at a time like that? I swear to you, O king, I will not go home and sleep with my wife. I will not go and wine and dine and do those things. I promise to you, O king, I will not do that." So David says, "Well, at least for one day. Can you stay at least one more day here in the palace?" And so that night, David brings Uriah in. They have a feast, and he gets him drunk with wine, fully expecting that David would finally return home, that Uriah would finally turn home, but he doesn't. And again, he sleeps outside of the palace in honor of his word, swearing to the king that he would not go home. So the next morning, the king he comes to Uriah, and he begins to write a note. He takes that note and he's going to put it in the hand of Uriah. And on that note, it says, "Put Uriah at the front line of the battlefield, where the fighting is the fiercest. And when the enemy comes, retreat. Be sure that Uriah is killed." And he puts that note in the hand of Uriah, and Uriah carries his death sentence to his commander. So he goes to his commander, he gives him the note, and sure enough, just as the note had promised, just as King David had instructed, he's put out on the front lines of the battle. The Ammonites, they come and they begin to attack, and they push back the forces against the boundary walls of the city. archers strike, some special forces and mighty men are killed, and yes, just as was commanded by King David and just as was followed through by the commander Joab, Uriah was killed. Bathsheba's husband was dead. So a messenger comes back to David to give a report to the war, and Joab was a little bit nervous because they had gotten very close to kind of the boundary walls of the city. He said, but if King David becomes angry because of this, just remind him that Uriah is now dead. Mm-hmm. And so the message is relayed, and King David responds to the messenger, and this is going to get back to Joab, and he says, tell Joab, don't be upset. These things happen. This is war. One sword rises against one man and then the other. Some die, some live. Tell him, don't be worried about that, but just to keep going and keep moving forward. And then sometime later, Bathsheba, she finds out that her husband, Uriah, is dead. And she mourns. David then summons again for her to come to his palace to be his wife. And she gives birth to the baby. But in all of this, the Lord was not pleased. For David had done evil in the sight of God. The next story that we'll hear, we're going to hear about Almighty God's response to David's actions. Right?